a world fraught with racial tensions and inequalities, confronting instances of racial insensitivity demands courage and moral clarity. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to be part of this conversation by simply sharing your thoughts in the comment section down below. Today in this video, you are joining me on a journey into the unsettling revelation of Jen Elliot, a renowned figure in anti-racism activism caught on camera using a racial slur. Now in this video, we look into the uncomfortable truths exposed by this incident, where the lines between allyship and accountability become blurred. Now, as we witness the reactions of individuals to Elliot's controversial remarks, we confront the sobering reality that even those championing social justice are not immune to criticism. Prepare to explore the complexities of privilege, accountability, and the imperative of holding ourselves and others to higher standards in the pursuit of true equality. Check out these videos.
Do you guys know who Jane Elliot is? And if you don't know who she is, I'm gonna fill you in. Jane Elliot was a school teacher, an anti-racism advocate, and she is the creator of one of the most controversial exercises in the United States that took place in 1968 when Martin Luther King died. This is Jane Elliot in 1968 at an all-white school. Now, she created the blue eye, brown eye exercise in response to Dr. Martin Luther King being assassinated in 1968. Go look it up because this is not about that. I ran into this video where a creator was basically saying that Jane said the N-word with the hard R in a room full of fucking people. You guys have to watch this clip. Listen to the end of the video because the man said he was sure that everybody in that room was shocked, and everybody spoke up super quick and was like, yeah, no, we weren't offended by that word. Like, we didn't. What? Watch the video and then comment below and tell me what you guys think. Are people dragging this? Are they dragging it? Or is there something to stand on here?
Jane Elliot said the N-word during Black History Month, and I was the only person in that room who called her out. And I finally got the footage. Here it is. I've been called angry a lot.
You've been called what?
Angry a lot.
I thought you said and I was going to correct you for that.
You were saying not to refer to people as black or white. How do we bring attention to the disparities?
Stop saying it.
But
And then they're going to say to you, I want to be called black. And then you're going to say, you want to be called vicious and savage? I can do that for you. You want me to call your child vicious and savage and cute? You know the history of that word? Because if you don't know the history of that word and why it's used, okay, maybe that's the reason you're willing to use it. Once you hear the history of the word, I think you say to yourself, this is a good idea. And I don't want to call them black because it's a derogatory term. I know that for years it was seen as a derogatory term. So young blacks decided to be called black. Well, no, it's still a derogatory term. That's still the history of that word. And it still means that you are less than. Because white means goodness and purity, people. And if black means savagery and evil, which one do you want to be called? Which one do you want to be called?
How can you talk about a word and the history behind it when you just said the N-word, hard R?
I said that to him for him and for me, not for you to worry about. But you worry about it if you want to. I never say that word, but I said this. Were you offended? Don't be offended for him. He can be offended for himself. You don't have to be for him. You understand that? He and I have met and have talked, and he knows where I'm coming from, and I know where he's coming from. And he and I don't see that as a derogatory term. We know exactly what we're talking about. Wow. You see it as a derogatory term. You had better use it. If it's a derogatory term, you don't use it. I ordinarily don't use it. I use it here with that young man. Number one, he's younger than I am, and if he doesn't listen, I'll spank him. Number two, he's bigger than I am, and I'm not going to mess with him. Number three, he and I understand about that word, and we know it is unacceptable. Now, if the only thing you have heard of all the things I've been saying here is the word NIGGPR, that means you're reacting negatively to that and thinking about that instead of thinking about all the rest of what I've said. All these people were listening, and you were feeling bad about the N-word.
Yeah, I feel like any realistic, genuine reality reaction. I feel like everybody in this room heard you say hard R, maybe not everybody, and they were horrified. No.
Why don't you speak for yourself, dear?
Now, what you probably weren't able to tell from that video is I have terrible social anxiety. So I was trying not to cry the whole time, and I was in complete shock. I mean, I feel like most people would be when the famous activist Jane Elliot is scolding them in front of a whole group of people, agreeing with her that she, as a white woman, can say the N-word. As you heard her say in that clip, saying that black people are black is offensive due to the history and context behind that word.
Recently surfaced of Jane Elliot using the N-word hard R during Black History Month and doubling down and gaslighting the person who called her out instead of apologizing can teach us a couple of things. First things first, being an ally does not mean you are above reproach or criticism and that your anti-racism education journey is over. The work of anti-racism and educating ourselves is constant work. It is everyday work. And that doesn't change even if you are an educator or a leader in this space. Jane Elliot is a world-renowned diversity educator who is held in high esteem for her work over the past few decades. She is what many would regard as an ally. However, just because you are an ally and are in community with marginalized group does not give you carte blanche to say slurs. Just because she's held in such high esteem, however, does not mean she is above reproach or correction. When you watch the video of her reaction as she is confronted, she dismisses the person who calls her out for using this word. Not only does she dismiss him, she scolds him in front of everybody. In that space, she was regarded as a leader. There was a power dynamic there. And instead of her to use her leadership for better and to use it as a teaching moment for not just herself, but everybody else, she instead decided to use it to belittle him, going as far as to justify her use of the N-word because she is in community with that person, presumably the black person she used that word towards. He knew what she meant and how she meant it. It's giving non-black people who use the N-word, who think it's okay for them to use the N-word because they're not white, and it will forever be a no. What this situation can also teach us, and shout out to the person who confronted her and called her out, is that sometimes in a room, it's going to be only you who's going to be the one to stand up and use your voice. Sometimes it is very scary to be in those situations, especially when there is a power dynamic that is present like there was with Jane Elliot in that space. The work of anti-racism and unconscious bias often means having uncomfortable conversations. The person who called her out, you could hear the fear and almost the hesitation in his voice, but he stayed resolute, he stayed strong, and I applauded him for that in light of Jane actively not only gaslighting him, but then using everybody else in the room to gaslight him into questioning, or trying to gaslight him into questioning what he heard and what happened. When you watch the video, please go and watch the video. I will tag the creator in the comments and in this video as well. Everyone had a visceral and instinctive, instant reaction when she said that word. You heard everybody react. When he addresses that, everybody, or the majority of the people in the room very likely heard her say that. Everybody in the room just goes, no. She turns it around on him and then says, oh, speak for yourself, and shames him into even bringing it up because she said all of these good things, but that one thing is all he could focus on. What she did was straight up nasty work, very nasty work. The work of anti-racism is not easy. Sometimes you will be the only one in the room speaking up for what is right, but you speak up regardless. Jane Elliot and other diversity, equity, inclusion leaders and speakers in this space, we are forever learning. The work of anti-racism is never over. And just because you call yourself an ally does not mean you are above reproach or being called in.
Well, this video of Jane Elliot using the N-word hard R during Black History Month and then being called out by a white student for doing so and then continuing to double down on her right to do it is an opportunity for us to learn and revisit the fact that we need to adhere to principles, ideas, and ideals, not the human being. No one, as another creator on this platform said, no one is above reproach. That includes me, that includes you, that includes Beyonce, that includes Taylor Swift, that includes Barack Obama, that includes any politician, any religious leader, any teacher, any parent, any family member. The principles and ideals that we espouse are the ones that will hold ourselves accountable when we cross the line. And inevitably, every human being crosses the line, which is why we have to stop the hero worship. We have to stop the celebrity worship. I am disappointed and saddened that Jane Elliot did that, but I am not shocked or surprised. I'm not shocked or surprised, not because I didn't believe in her work, not because I didn't think the work was good, but because she's a human being and she's a white woman in America. She's going to do things that are problematic because we're sitting in a world that creates that circumstance over and over again unless you're constantly unpacking it for yourself, not just teaching it to other people. For yourself, you're going to make that mistake. And even when you do all the inner work and you do all the outer work, you still may do something that is problematic and reprehensible, especially when it comes to using language incorrectly and thinking you're so comfortable. You know, my grandmama used to have a saying where she was like, don't get so comfortable you put your feet on my bed. That's what happens. When you're in a house that you're not familiar with, you start doing things you would do in your own house. And that's the same thing that happens with allies and advocates and people who work in communities that they are not a part of. They get too comfortable and they put their feet on the bed. That's what happened to Jane Elliott. That's what happens to a lot of people, though. That's why you adhere to the principles, ideals, and ideas, not the person.
You know, what stood out for me the most when I saw that Jane Elliott video wasn't her using the N-word with the hard R. Then yeah, that's a problem, okay? That's a whole other issue. But for me, what stood out was her pedagogy and the way that she uses shame and judgment in a lot of her work. Now, this is not really about Jane herself, because she's not the only one that does this. And I'll be quite frank, a lot of the kind of popular DEI, anti-racist, anti-oppressive educators that kind of go viral, that have the platforms that they do, that are able to move in spaces and be a quote-unquote authority, do so because they can go viral, or they have these kind of moments that are deploying judgment, shame, and guilt in one way, shape, or form in the space. But that is what people are expecting and are used to, because we live in a system, y'all. This is what racial capitalism is through a Christian white patriarchal ideology, is we live in a system that teaches us how to be disciplined through judgment, shame, and guilt. So when those emotions are deployed within spaces that are trying to push back against oppressive systems, there's a familiarity there that needs to be made strange. And it is not just within these structures, okay? So I'm not picking on DEI and anti-racism work. Listen to what I am saying. I am saying that in another space, we see the replication of the current power structure. And because this current power structure is so good at reproducing and infecting any space it's in, because it is not loyal, it does not care what vessel it uses, it just wants to ensure that its dominance in one way, shape, or form is replicated over space and time. When we are in these spaces that say we want to dream of different ways of being by understanding the systems that are keeping us confined, we have to be very clear about not allowing those spirits in. So judgment, shame, and guilt must be examined, but they cannot be invited at the table. Now, when I say that, that does not mean I'm saying coddle people. Because at the end of the day, what all of this is about is us not being able to have an honest conversation with ourselves and one another about how we think we are comfortable in these oppressive capitalistic systems, and in reality, we are not. So when I'm working with people, right, I don't need judgment and shame in the space. I needed to sit at the side, because that is getting in the way of us really having a mirror and facing the ways that we are attached and beholden to these spaces that don't give a shit about us, but it is the only thing we know. So I need people to understand that you are not comfortable in these systems. You are not comfortable in that home. You are not comfortable in these locations that demand you give up your body and your labor and your humanity for you to barely survive. But because that has been fed back to us as comfortability, when we are trying to break from that because we are so not used to just being in our bodies, we then reproduce what we know. So the Jane Elliott controversy to me is a bigger conversation about how do we remove these energies of shame, guilt, and judgment in spaces that say they are anti-oppressive to get to new ways of knowing and being.
I really want to contribute to this Jane Elliott conversation is that I'm quite disappointed in Jane Elliott, because watching her videos in college and before, I went to college, I served in the Army. And so like in the latter years of my Army service, I came across her videos, and she spoke so profoundly to me. And when it came to addressing racism in white spaces, and to some degree, I actually like her teaching, because so often when it comes to conversations about race, white people like to keep it cute and keep it comfortable. And so I appreciated that she would push the boundaries of where white comfort was and encourage them to step out of that comfort zone and actually take in the reality of this country. Secondly, what I like to say is that she openly talked about how, Martin Luther King and what he meant to her, and when he died, they kind of like started her blue-eyed and green-eyed challenge. And I think the lesson that could be taken from this entire situation is that white people are not exempt to racism, right? Because a lot of white people think that there's a point that they can reach to where they no longer have to fear being racist, right? And I feel that Jane Elliott thought that because she spent so much of her life trying to educate racism and do what she's done, she felt exempt to being called racist. And the last thing I'll say, and I don't know another way to say this in a gentler way, but this goes to show that people, once they reach a certain age, need to retire, right? Jane Elliott should have been retired and went on to go do what she needs to do in her life, but because she's chosen to try and stay within this generational time thing, she at the end of the day ruined all of the work she spent so hard doing. She's having the same issue that a lot of our government officials are having, a lot of American citizens who are driving and getting wrecks with the elderly. I feel that more and more we're coming to grips with this idea that at some point the elderly just need to retire and go live their life. But because of our capitalistic society, they can't retire. That all of the hard work they put in to make their Social Security is being taken away. So in a roundabout way, we're stuck with these elderly people that are spewing and get stuck in this vortex of not hypocrisy, of just being stagnant and refusing to take accountability and consistently learn and adapt to the changes happening around them. So do I feel bad that Jane Elliott is being taken to task about her remarks? Absolutely not. But it is yet again another sign, another example of how when white people get too comfortable, they'll do what they do best, resort to racism. So
now, the incident involving Jane Elliott's use of a racial slur highlights the complexities of challenges inherent in discussions of race, privilege, and accountability, even within activist circles. While Elliot has gained recognition for her work in anti-racism education, her use of such language raises important questions about the limits of allyship and the responsibility of individuals regardless of their intentions or affiliations. The use of racial slurs, regardless of context or intent, perpetuates harm and reinforces systems of oppression. Racial slurs carry with them a history of violence, discrimination, and dehumanization, making their use unacceptable under any circumstances. Now, even if Elliot believed she was using the word in a specific context or within a particular community, the impact of her words cannot be dismissed or excused. Being an ally in the fight against racism requires more than just words or gestures. It demands a commitment to challenging systemic injustices and actively working to dismantle them. While Elliot may consider herself an ally to marginalized communities, her actions in this instance undermine the trust and credibility she may have garnered. True allyship involves listening, learning, and being open to criticism, even when it is uncomfortable or challenging. As a palm-color individual, Elliot occupies a position of privilege and power within society. Her use of a racial slur reinforces the unequal power dynamics that perpetuate racism and oppression. It is incumbent upon those in positions of privilege to recognize their privilege and use it responsibly to uplift marginalized voices, rather than perpetuating harm through insensitive language or actions. Elliot's assertion that she was using the word within a specific community raises questions about consent and boundaries. While communities may have their own internal dynamics and norms, it is important to recognize that the use of racial slurs can never be divorced from their broader social and historical context. Even within certain communities, the use of such language can be harmful and perpetuate stereotypes and discrimination. In the aftermath of this incident, it is crucial for Elliot to reflect on her actions, listen to the perspectives of those impacted, and take meaningful steps to address the harm caused. Now, this includes acknowledging the impact of her words, apologizing sincerely, and committing to ongoing education and growth. Accountability is an essential aspect of allyship and activism, and it requires humility, introspection, and a willingness to change. The incident involving Jane Elliot serves as a stark reminder that no one is above reproach when it comes to confronting racism and discrimination. Regardless of one's intentions or affiliations, the use of racial slurs is never acceptable and demands accountability. Racial slurs have deep roots in history, often used as tools of oppression and dehumanization against marginalized groups. Now, these words carry with them a legacy of violence, trauma, and discrimination, making their use particularly harmful and offensive. The use of racial slurs can have profound psychological and emotional effects on individuals from marginalized communities. And hearing these words, especially from individuals in positions of power or authority, evokes feelings of anger, fear, and betrayal. It reinforces the sense of otherness and reinforces negative stereotypes. While individuals may claim that their use of racial slurs was not intended to be harmful, the impact of the words cannot be ignored. Intentions do not negate the harm caused by language that perpetuates systemic racism and reinforces oppressive structures. It is the responsibility of individuals to be mindful of the impact of their words and actions on others. Jane Elliot's work in anti-racism education has often centered on provocative methods aimed at challenging racial biases and fostering empathy. However, the use of a racial slur in this context raises questions about the efficacy and appropriateness of such methods. While provocation can stimulate dialogue, it must be done with sensitivity and respect for the dignity of all individuals involved. The incident involving her underscores the importance of understanding intersectionality in discussions of race and allyship. While Elliot may consider herself an ally to marginalized communities, her actions highlight the need for allies to recognize and address their own privileges and biases. True allyship requires ongoing self-reflection, humility, and a commitment to amplifying the voices of those most affected by systemic oppression. In the aftermath of this incident, there is an opportunity for reflection, dialogue, and growth. Holding individuals accountable for their words and actions is essential for fostering trust and building inclusive communities. Now, this may involve sincere apologies, reparative actions, and a commitment to ongoing education and dialogue to prevent similar incidents in the future. This incident raises questions about cultural sensitivity and the importance of understanding the historical and cultural significance of words and symbols. Racial slurs are not simply offensive terms. They are rooted in centuries of oppression and violence against marginalized communities. It is essential for individuals, especially those in positions of influence, to educate themselves about the impact of such language and strive to create inclusive and respectful environments. As a palm-color woman and prominent figure in anti-racism activism, she wields a significant amount of power and influence. Her use of a racial slur underscores the need for individuals in positions of power to be held accountable for their words and actions. It also highlights the importance of centering the voices and experiences of marginalized communities in discussions of racism and discrimination. This incident has sparked dialogue and debate within both activist circles and the broader public sphere. While the use of a racial slur is deeply hurtful and offensive, it also presents an opportunity for reflection, education, and healing. Meaningful dialogue and engagement fosters greater understanding and empathy, leading to positive change and reconciliation. The incident underscores the importance of recognizing the intersecting forms of oppression that individuals may face based on race, gender, class, and other identities. Solidarity among marginalized communities and their allies is crucial in the fight against systemic injustice. However, solidarity must be grounded in mutual respect, understanding, and a commitment to challenging all forms of oppression. I feel there is a need for concrete actions to address the harm caused and prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. This may include community dialogues, restorative justice processes, and ongoing anti-racism education and training. It is important for such individuals and organizations to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in their policies and practices. Ultimately, the incident serves as a reminder of the ongoing work required to dismantle racism and create a more just and equitable society. It calls upon individuals to engage in critical self-reflection, to confront their own biases and privileges, and commit to the ongoing pursuit of racial justice by acknowledging the harm caused and taking meaningful steps towards accountability and reconciliation. A spade should be called a spade, and her being an ally doesn't prevent her from getting backlash or being corrected if she is wrong. We have finally come to the end of the video. What do you, my viewers, have to say? Share your thoughts as well in the comment section. Thank you for always watching, and see you in my next video.